I lied to cover her tracks, and then I ended up tangled in something so much worse. Started with a simple favor. Just say I was with you last night, she whispered, barely looking at me. Her eyes flicked to the side like she didn't want to see my reaction. Please. Just this once. That was Ashley. My best friend since college. Messy, magnetic, impossible to say no to. She had a way of asking for things that made you feel like refusing would ruin everything, not just the favor but the friendship itself. So I said yes. I told her boyfriend Jake that she and I had gone out for drinks, that she'd crashed at my place, and that she'd left early because of a work call. Easy. Harmless. Except it didn't feel harmless. Because when Jake came to thank me, and I mean really looked at me with this slow, unreadable gaze that lingered longer than it should have, something in my stomach turned over. I'd always noticed him. Of course I had. He was the kind of guy who walked into a room like he already knew how you'd react to him. Not cocky. Just steady. Strong. Tall enough to make you glance up and forget what you were about to say. And he was polite, thoughtful, with this quiet voice that made you lean in to hear him better. But I never let myself think of him like that. Not really. He was hers. Until that night. We were alone in his kitchen. The light was soft and golden, shadows stretching across the counters. He leaned back against the sink, arms crossed, watching me with this amused smile. So what did you two get up to? He asked. Innocent words. But the way he said them wasn't innocent at all. And I should have brushed it off. I should have laughed, changed the subject. But something about his tone, the suggestion behind it, made my skin heat. I looked at him. Really looked. And that's when it hit me, he knew. Not everything. Not the truth about Ashley. But he knew I was lying. And instead of calling me out, he was enjoying it. Letting it stretch between us like a live wire. I guess we just talked, I said, voice low. Girl stuff. His eyes didn't leave mine. Must have been a hell of a conversation. I swallowed. My pulse was a drumbeat in my throat. It felt dangerous, like I was walking a line I didn't even know was there until now. A line I hadn't just crossed. I was already on the other side. And the worst part? I wanted to keep going. Ashley had always been the wild one. Loud, flirtatious, magnetic, the kind of girl people turned toward in a room without even realizing they were doing it. I was her shadow, her safe place. The one who drove her home when she drank too much. The one who kept her secrets, including the biggest one of all. The way I used to dream about her boyfriend. It's not something I'm proud of. I never say it out loud. Never even let myself fully feel it. But it was there, buried beneath every fake smile, every friendly hug. The first time I met Jake, it was like I'd been thrown forward into a future I wasn't supposed to want. He shook my hand and held my eyes just a second longer than normal. That's all it took. That second lodged itself in my brain like a splinter. Sharp. Quiet. Always there. He and Ashley didn't make sense on paper. She cheated constantly, not always physically but emotionally, recklessly. She liked the attention. The thrill of being wanted. Jake was her opposite. Grounded. Loyal. Steady. And I'd always wondered, did he know? Did he choose to look the other way? Or was he just waiting? That night, when I lied for her, I realized something had shifted between him and me. Something subtle but unmistakable. Like we were finally looking at each other without the filters, no more pretending. And it didn't help that Ashley was growing careless. The man she was sneaking around with? He wasn't even subtle. He texted her when Jake was home. She smiled at her phone when she thought no one was watching. She laughed too hard at nothing. She didn't ask if I was okay with lying. She assumed I would be. And I was. First. But the more I saw Jake, the tired look in his eyes, the way he tried to pretend he didn't notice, the harder it became to ignore the knot twisting in my chest. And then came the night that changed everything. Ashley told me she was going away for the weekend. Another work trip, she said with that wink I'd come to resent. Jake called me the next day. Hey, he said casually. Just wondering if you and Ash are still hanging out. She's not picking up. My mouth went dry. It was a test. He knew. I could feel it in the silence between his words. I took a breath. Yeah, I lied again. She's in the shower. He didn't answer for a beat. Then, soft and deliberate. You want to come over? Just like that. No explanation. No pretending. He was handing me a match. And I was already soaked in gasoline. I stood outside his apartment door for a full minute before knocking. My heart wouldn't slow down. It thudded behind my ribs like it was trying to keep me from going in. I should have turned around. I should have gone home and left the lie alone. But I knocked. He opened the door like he'd been standing on the other side waiting for me. No smile. Just that unreadable expression again, the kind that made it impossible to tell if he was angry or just curious. "Hey," he said softly, stepping back to let me in. His place smelled like him, something clean and warm with a faint trace of cologne in the air. The lights were low. The windows cracked open, letting in the night. "You want something to drink?" he asked as he walked into the kitchen. "Sure," I said, trying to sound normal, trying not to stare at the way his shoulders moved beneath his t-shirt. I wasn't even sure what I'd just agreed to. Water? Wine? Anything would have been fine if it gave me something to hold. When he handed me the glass, his fingers brushed mine. Just a touch. Barely anything. But my body lit up like it had been waiting for that exact moment all night. I sat on the edge of his couch, knees pressed together, every part of me tense. He sat across from me, one arm slung over the back of the chair, drink resting in his other hand. And then silence. The kind that presses in around you. Heavy. Full. I took a sip just to have something to do. "So," I started, then stopped. What could I possibly say? He answered for me. "She's cheating on me, isn't she?" It wasn't even a question. Just a truth dropped into the middle of the room. I looked up at him. My mouth open, closed again. I couldn't lie this time. He nodded like he already knew what my silence meant. Like he'd known for a while. "I always thought she'd tell me eventually," he said quietly. "But I guess I just wanted to hear it from you." "Jake?" I whispered. His eyes were on mine now, steady and unwavering. "You've always been honest with me. Until lately." That stung more than I expected. "I didn't want to hurt you," I said. A small bitter smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "But you didn't want to tell me the truth either." I didn't answer. I couldn't. The silence returned, thicker this time. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes flicking down to my lips, then back up to my eyes. "I used to think you hated me," he said softly. "What?" I blinked. "Why?" "Because you avoided me. You barely looked at me when we talked. You always stood just far enough away that I couldn't reach you." My breath caught. My fingers gripped the glass tighter. "I didn't hate you," I said. "No." He stood slowly, crossing the space between us, stopping just a breath away. "Then what was it?" I looked up at him, heart racing, my voice barely a whisper. "I didn't trust myself." His jaw tensed. His gaze dropped again, slower this time. Neither of us moved. Not forward. Not back. Just there. In that space. Too close to lie. Too afraid to touch. He was so close I could feel the warmth coming off his skin. It made the air thick between us, like I was breathing something heavier than oxygen. I should have stood up. I should have said goodbye, left the apartment, locked myself in my car until the heat of what was building between us faded into something safer. But I didn't move. Neither did he. We hovered in that space, suspended between guilt and gravity. His voice was low when he spoke again, like he wasn't sure if he wanted me to hear it. "She never looks at me the way you do." My chest tightened. "Jake." He shook his head just once. "I used to pretend I didn't notice. But I did. Every time you looked at me like you were holding your breath." I blinked and my eyes burned. Maybe from guilt. Maybe from the way he was finally saying what I'd never let myself believe. His hand reached up slowly, like he wanted to give me time to stop him. His fingers brushed a strand of hair from my cheek, barely touching my skin. But it was enough to send a ripple through me. A shiver that moved like a whisper down my spine. "I shouldn't be here," I whispered. "But you are." He stepped back only half a step, as if giving me the chance to walk away. I stood, not to leave, but because I couldn't sit anymore. I needed air. Distance. Something. I walked toward the window and stared out into the dark, arms crossed tight over my chest. I could feel him behind me, still watching. "I didn't come here for this," I said. "But you didn't stop it either," he said, voice quieter now. "And neither did I." I turned to face him. We were both standing now, two people who'd lived too long pretending we didn't feel what we felt. And now that everything was cracked open, there was no clean way to put it back together. "I don't want to be a mistake," I said. His eyes met mine. "You never were." He stepped toward me again, close enough that I could feel his breath on my face. My hands trembled at my sides, and I clenched them to keep from reaching for him. "I want to kiss you," he said, voice low like a confession. I closed my eyes. Every part of me screamed yes. But my lips said, "Don't." He didn't. He just stood there. So close I could feel the ache of wanting something I wasn't supposed to want. And I knew in that moment, if he kissed me now, I wouldn't stop him. If he touched me, I would let him. But instead he stepped back. His voice was rough when he finally spoke again. "Stay. Just for a little while. We don't have to. I just don't want to be alone." I nodded. Okay. I wasn't sure if I was lying to him or to myself, but I stayed. And it wasn't over. It was only beginning. We didn't touch. Not for the first hour at least. I stayed on one end of the couch, curled up with a throw blanket I didn't need, pretending to scroll through my phone. He was on the other side, flipping through some show on mute. Neither of us were watching. The quiet felt louder with every passing minute. He glanced over once like he was about to say something, then didn't. I looked away, but my body was a storm, every nerve awake. My skin felt too tight, too aware of the space between us. A space that used to feel respectful. Now it just felt unbearable. "I don't know what I'm doing," I whispered, not looking at him. "I do," he said. His voice was soft, confident, but there was something underneath it, a kind of ache that matched my own. I turned my head. Our eyes locked. Neither of us blinked. And then he moved. Slowly, like he was afraid to startle me. Like he wanted to give me time to change my mind. He reached across the couch and brushed his fingers against my hand. Just that. The faintest trace of contact. But it felt like an answer. I turned toward him, legs folding under me. Heart pounding so hard I could hear it. "I don't want to lie anymore," I said. He leaned in, so close that I could feel the heat of his breath on my cheek. "Then don't." His lips stopped a breath away from mine. Waiting. Giving me the choice. So I closed the space. Our mouths met, soft at first, barely there. Question, not a demand. But the second I felt the press of his lips, something in me shattered. Like a dam that had held back too much for too long. His hands moved to my waist, not pulling, just resting, grounding me. My fingers tangled in his shirt. I didn't even realize I'd gasped until I felt him pause. "Okay?" he whispered against my mouth. I nodded, unable to speak. There was no rush. No violence. Just heat, slow and certain and deep. Like we'd both been drowning and finally found each other's breath. His kiss wasn't perfect. It was messy and unsure and aching with all the things we weren't supposed to feel. But it was real. And it lit something inside me I didn't know had been waiting. He pulled back just enough to rest his forehead against mine. We were both breathing hard, neither of us moving. "I've wanted this for longer than I should have," he said. "So have I." That truth hung between us. No longer hidden. No longer safe. And still, neither of us moved away. We were too far past that now. There was no going back after that kiss. Not because we crossed some moral line, but because something had shifted inside me. Inside him. A quiet resistance that had lived between us for so long was gone. He kissed me again. Slower this time. Like he wasn't trying to prove anything, just feel everything. The softness of it unraveled me. I felt myself lean in like my whole body was chasing warmth. He pulled me gently into his lap, hands careful, like I might break or disappear. But I wasn't fragile. I was starving. And he was the first person who ever looked at me like I was enough. His lips moved down the line of my jaw, grazing skin that hadn't been touched in a way that mattered for too long. I tilted my head instinctively, giving him access without thinking. His breath skimmed my throat, and my body answered without permission. A sound escaped me, small and involuntary. He froze. Too much. I shook my head quickly. "No. Please don't stop." He didn't. But he didn't rush either. Everything about the way he touched me was patient, focused, like he was listening to every reaction, every flicker of breath, every shiver of skin. And I responded in ways I didn't expect. The weight of his hand at the small of my back made my chest tighten. His thumb brushing my hip sent a wave of heat spiraling low in my stomach. I could feel the tension between us building like a storm. Each touch made me ache deeper. Not just from want but from being seen. Because this wasn't lust. Not really. It was need. Emotional. Physical. Unspoken. The kind that creeps up slowly, until one moment you're pretending to ignore it. And the next, it's the only thing keeping you breathing. We didn't say a word. Words would have broken it. Instead, we let our bodies talk. In glances, in quiet gasps. In the way his hands gripped me just a little tighter when I whispered his name. I clung to him like I was afraid he'd vanish. And maybe I was. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew this moment wasn't built to last. It was stolen. Wrong. But in the hush of that dim room, wrapped in his warmth, in his breath, in his heartbeat, it was the most right I'd ever felt. I didn't sleep. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't want to. I stayed awake beside him, listening to the quiet rise and fall of his breath, trying to memorize every detail. The weight of his arm draped over my waist. The way his fingers twitched slightly when he was dreaming. The warmth of his chest against my back, steady and grounding. And the guilt that bloomed quietly in my throat, like something alive and coiled. The truth is, it hadn't felt wrong in the moment. Not once. Not even a flicker of hesitation. Every part of me had leaned into it. Into him like I'd been waiting for this to happen all along. But in the stillness after, when the heat faded and the silence returned, the reality crawled in. He wasn't mine. And I wasn't supposed to be here. He stirred behind me, his hand tightening slightly around my waist, his lips brushing the back of my shoulder. "You're still here," he murmured sleepily. I nodded. "Yeah." A pause. Then softer. "Are you okay?" I turned toward him, resting my forehead against his. "I don't know." He didn't push. He just held me tighter, like maybe if we stayed like this long enough the outside world wouldn't find us. But it would. And it did, the moment my phone lit up on the nightstand. Ashley. I stared at her name, my body going rigid. Jake saw it too. His hand slipped away from me. The warmth in the room shifted, cooled. Like something invisible had just walked in and sat between us. I answered. My voice barely worked. "Hey. You were supposed to text me back last night," she said. "Where were you?" My eyes met Jake's. He looked away. "I fell asleep early," I lied. "Sorry." A pause. "Too long." "You're still at home?" she asked. I hesitated. "Yeah." Another pause. Then, "Right." Something in her voice was off. Too calm. She hung up before I could say anything else. I sat up, staring at my hands. They didn't feel like mine anymore. Jake reached for me. "What do we do now?" I looked at him. This man I'd wanted in silence for so long, and for the first time I felt afraid of the answer. Because no matter how good it had felt, it wasn't just our secret anymore. Something had shifted. And she knew. I didn't hear from Ashley for 3 days. Not a call. Not a text. Nothing. I thought that was her way of punishing me. Letting the silence stretch tight around my neck. I kept replaying her voice from that last call, trying to pick it apart. Too calm. Too knowing. She knew something. I just didn't know how much. Then she asked to meet. Just like that. No accusations. No yelling. Just a casual, "Let's grab coffee." I agreed. And walking into that cafe felt like stepping into a confession booth I hadn't asked for. She was already there, sipping something iced, looking completely unbothered. No makeup. No performance. Just Ashley, stripped down in a way that made me nervous. "I know," she said before I could sit. I didn't pretend to be confused. She stirred her drink. "You stayed with him, didn't you?" I opened my mouth, but what was I going to say? "No." I figured. She went on, not waiting for me. "That's why I asked you to lie for me." My stomach dropped. "What?" She finally looked up at me, and her eyes weren't angry. They were cold. Icy with something that looked like satisfaction. "I knew about the way you looked at him," she said softly. "For months. I saw the way you'd stiffen when he hugged you. How you wouldn't meet his eyes when I talked about the two of us. I swallowed, heart thudding. So you what? Set me up? She smiled, slow and terrifying. I wanted to see if you'd actually do it. If you'd lie for me. If you'd break. I couldn't breathe. But here's the thing, she continued, leaning forward. I'm not mad. I'm not even surprised. I wanted to see if he wanted you back. And guess what? She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. He did. I stared at her, stunned. You wanted him, she said. But now you have to keep him. After what you did. After what you are. And then she stood. Just like that. Leaving me in a storm of my own making. One she'd orchestrated from the start. Because the truth wasn't that I'd betrayed her. The truth was that she'd been waiting for me to. And I walked right into her hands. And